The average Canadian has a rather romantic view of the Canadian Arctic.
What's fascinating about the Arctic is how gradual the change has been. Where the tipping point is coming now is with climate change. It's been a slow progression where there's been signs of change, but really has had no impact on what the day-to-day life of people has been like.
There are some predictions that in 20, 30 years, there will be no ice whatsoever in the Arctic Ocean during the summers. This opens the Arctic up to navigation, development of fisheries, tourism. Essentially, globalization is coming to the Arctic because of the melting of the Arctic Ocean.
The North American Arctic is unique in terms of how wide its space is, how harsh its environment. The Nordic countries and the Russian Arctic are completely different in that sense.
The Russian and Scandinavian Nordic Arctic, these are people who wake up in the morning and they go to sleep at night thinking about Arctic development. Oil and gas is still developing very rapidly north of Norway. Russia is implementing a new system of icebreaker tankers to bring enormous amounts of natural gas through the northern sea route.
They have the attention of their national governments. These are spaces that are considered and integrated into the vision of what each of these countries is.
The governance of the North American Arctic is fragmented among three nation states, i.e. Greenland, Canada, and the USA, and because of the lack of development and cooperation of the regional governments in the area.
So what happens is the southern governments, the capitals, will make decisions, and it's not necessarily that it's meant to be in the interests of the South, but they don't have a full understanding of what the northern interests and needs are.
The Canadian Arctic and, for the most part, Alaska and Greenland have been sadly neglected in terms of the amounts of investment and interests and policies that would lead to real jobs and real futures for the people, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous.
The connections between Greenland, the Canadian territories, and Alaska are really about the Indigenous people that have been there from time immemorial. And what that means is that they have maintained those connections through all the different governments that have come and gone. And it's through those connections that you really see why it's important to look at the North American Arctic as a whole. So it's a very powerful opportunity for southern governments to draw off their vision of what the Arctic can look like.
We need a whole new network of ports and marine corridors in the North American Arctic, going from Alaska to Greenland.
Another real issue in the North American Arctic that needs to be tackled immediately is the high cost of energy. This is something that flows through all impacts communities in all walks of life. Issues around food security. It's a huge issue in all areas of the North American Arctic because of the vast spaces and the remote communities. The other issue is that there's a general recognition that non-renewable resources are only one of the assets of the North, and they really need to look beyond that, which means that they need to look at diversified economies.
If we don't take advantage of the opportunities that are there, we're going to fall further and further behind Russia and the Nordic countries in Arctic development. So we must work on this issue of the gap in investment and planning.